Welcome in here to Three True Values Big Board. I'm your host, James Fletcher, alongside Jamie Shaw as we get things started here. I know we're still in the preseason, but there is a lot to talk about. On today's episode, we are going to break down some of the returning stars in college basketball. Where do they stand as we talk NBA draft? Of course, not a one-to-one sort of comparison when you talk about the stars of this level and who is going to break out and have great performances at the next level. So, as we bring in Jamie Shaw here, we're having some technical difficulties. We'll get him on in just a second. We are going to go back and forth. We're going to throw out some names that we're really interested in. On today's episode, we're going to break down the SEC returning players and transfers. We'll talk about them as well. And then we will move on to the ACC. If you're looking for more Big Ten content, Big 12, even the Big East, do not worry. We will have you covered over the next couple of weeks. Remember, we are doing kind of an alternating schedule here on Tuesdays. Next week, we will be talking recruiting. And then the week after, you're going to come back here and find some NBA draft content. So this is kind of the schedule, what we're going to have for you throughout the season. And of course, remember, we will have Thursday episodes as well. Right now, in the middle of our preview series, Big Ten coming up on Thursday, along with the Big East. And now we have Jamie Shaw back with us after a couple of technical difficulties there. And so let's go ahead, Jamie. Let's get into it. Let's start talking about some of these returning stars in college basketball. We'll start in the SEC. I'll kind of lead us off. I'll take us down a road here because there's a lot of players that I know that me and you both want to talk about in this conference. I want to start though with Otega Oweh at Kentucky. Last year, averaged 16 points a game, over 1.5 steals per game on the wing, was an all SEC player in his first year under Mark Pope, had a big breakout from his past performances. I really like him to take on a big role in this Kentucky team that I think is going to have as much, if not more, success than last year's team. I'm really fascinated to see how that impacts his draft stock as a guy who plays on the wing, a position that we know is coveted in the NBA.
Yeah, no, always going to be very interesting. He had some very clear successes with some very clear things that he needs to work on when it comes to his game. I think the overall production is something that's going to be very attractive. Also, the two-way ability and ability to get downhill, slash straight lines down to the basket, play efficiently on the offensive end, while also creating havoc, guarding multiple spots on the defensive end. I think the measurement's going to be big for him. Size and length and all that, and what he measures in that way to be a true perimeter threat defensively at the next level, and to be able to show the shot serviceable. Not even really not even really needs to make it, but just a threat that he's going to make it.
Yeah.
At a 38% type clip, going from there, tighten up the handle a little bit, decision making, tighten up the assist to turnover type stuff, being able to actually move the ball a little bit and create some openings that he has. But I think he's just got he's got the high floor of somebody that has had success, that has seen success, as long as he continues to add to his game a little bit. The offensive side of the ball, I think the defensive stuff's there pretty good.
Yeah.
The offensive side of the ball continue to add to his ability to make stuff happen.
Yeah, and he's a guy who I think is, like you said, high floor. I think he's somebody who probably sits somewhere in the high or low 20s, I guess, at this point, as I kind of look at a board and try to move players up and down. But I think he's got that potential to be that late lottery kind of guy. We see a lot of wings end up in that conversation. Teams that maybe have a star piece, maybe two-star pieces, they're looking for guys to complement that and help their best players. He's a guy who I think can come in and do that. But who's somebody that you're interested in? We'll kind of bounce back and forth here.
For sure. I think it kind of starts and finishes with LeBaron Philon for me in the SEC. Kind of looking at what he's coming back to do. There was a lot of speculation last year about him leaving or staying. At the very last hour, he decided to come back to Alabama. Positional size at the point guard position, somebody who's able to kind of live in the paint. He's got a crafty handle with a little bit of burst to be able to get downhill. Love his ability to touch the paint and collapse to the defense without necessarily a screen. With him, he can shoot the ball, but I think showing more consistency in game and shooting the ball is going to be big for him. Also, the decision making. Once he gets into the teeth of the defense and collapses them, where does he go with the ball and how does he create
Yeah.
advantages for his team consistently? I think cleaning those aspects up of his game is going to be the next steps. He does have that crafty handle, that length, that positional size. He does have the ability to touch the paint at will, or consistently. I don't want to say at will, but consistently at the point of attack. Those are all huge when it comes to looking at the next level, adding strength, not getting knocked off your line when it comes to your base and all that is the next step for him. But I think there's a lot of stuff there at the base level. He's not a ready-made product by any stretch of the imagination, but teams are going to look at what can you add? How can you add? What does he already have, and what can you add to make him a serviceable type player? And I think LeBaron Philon has a lot of intriguing stuff there as he continues to add strength, as he continues to tighten up the decision making, and to really check a lot of boxes.
Yeah, the consistency on the shot is definitely going to be the thing that people are looking for. It's not just catch and shoot, but also off the dribble, because of
Mm-hmm.
course he is a point guard at the end of the day. And I think that that's where it's going to be interesting to see the number that he puts up next to his name in the stat column versus how it changes the perception of NBA evaluators. Because if he just shoots a lot of catch and shoot stuff, he gets to his spots, I think he can up that number in the percentage column significantly this season. How much does that impact how NBA scouts actually view him at the next level if he has to be off ball to knock
Mm-hmm.
down those perimeter shots? I think that's going to be something to follow where uh, people are going to see that column say something, but it's going to matter how he got to that number as much as the fact that he did get there.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing with Phylon that I really like and that I think is going to translate not just this season, but beyond in his basketball career is that he plays on and off the ball. He was a guy who
Yeah.
complemented Mark Sears, um, not having to be a two guard, but being able to play alongside other ones. That's something that we see at the next level, especially alongside stars, is really valuable because you give them that night off on the defensive end, or a few possessions off offensively where they're not having to run everything. You can keep them on the floor longer, and having this kind of role player beside them can be key for some of the biggest teams in the NBA.
For sure, and something about Philon too. Early in his career, before he transferred to Link and everything, he was a scorer. He had over 1,000 points in the high school season and all that stuff. He was setting records in Alabama as a scorer, as a bucket getter and stuff. So he can do that as well. I think that you mentioned that as well. I think the biggest key, as you said, the pull-up jump shooting, which is imperative for a point guard at the next level. Being able to hit a pull-up jump shot, I think that's going to be big for him. Kind of actually, his entire pace in the mid game I think is a development key. That goes along with collapsing the defense, making decisions. That goes along with the pull-up jump shot. That goes along with kind of the pace in the mid-range development there. But he's got a lot of interesting tools that really do translate.
Yeah, I'll take us to the reigning champs here because I don't think there's a player who I just personally love their game more than Thomas Houck at Florida. I mean, he just 10-6 last year, but you look at the on-off numbers, you look at all the analytics, and I understand that you can get caught up in that stuff, but it translated to win. When
Mm-hmm.
he was on the floor, Florida won basketball games. And you look at the numbers for Walter Clayton, Will Richard, Elijah Martin, those other guys who were integral parts of a national championship team, and their analytics in terms of on-off, in terms of plus minus, they pale in comparison to what happened when they put Thomas Houck on the floor. He's a guy who just has an endless motor. He has really, really top end athleticism, and he is developing quickly. I feel like, at least over the course of the last year and a half, 2 years, his skills to complement all of those things. He's a guy who I think has lottery potential if he can develop that 3 point shot further and prove that he's a threat as a slasher and stationary in that corner.
Yeah, his is an interesting one because last year he came in and played against fours, mostly fours and fives. And if you're mobile and all that as a 4-5, you're able to kind of look mobile and athletic as a 4-5. It'll be interesting to see this year if he slides down to the three, how mobile and athletic he looks playing against threes, especially in the SEC. I think the look test is going to be very interesting for him. He came in last year like his hair was on fire, just an unbelievable motor running through a brick wall. making hustle plays all over the court for 18 or so minutes a game. And that looks super intriguing. Now, how can he create advantages on both ends of the floor as a three, as kind of that combo forward is going to be very interesting to see. Is he able to get to spots and knock down shots? Is he able to stretch it from the corner um, and knock down shots? You see the value in guys kind of in the past couple of drafts looking at maybe a Jarris Walker's not necessarily 1-to-1, but maybe a Taylor Hendricks.
Mhm.
Guys kind of along those lines and that lineage of the combo guys who can stretch it a little, who can do some create advantages off the bounce a little bit, and then also guard across both uh, forward position. So I'll be very interested to see what Thomas Howell looks like doing that. Is he just an athletic, mobile guy guarding fours and fives, or can he actually be a combo forward type situation? And how does that look? How do his feet move, and how does he create leverage on the defensive end, doing that as well as the jump shot? And I think it's going to be fascinating to see because, like you said, there's incredible value in that archetype of player as you've seen in the past few drafts going, toward the lottery up in the first round. But there's also value in the high motor four man as he continues to add weight as well, just not quite as high. So I think his range is pretty robust right now, depending on what the look test looks like and the development that he has within that realm.
He's a guy who my comparison for him, and it's obviously not a 1-to-1. We talk about that all the time here, especially when we're talking NBA draft stuff or
Yeah,
recruiting. So we're going to say it a lot this year.
yeah.
But I kind of think back to Florida Chandler Parsons. Kind of started as a role player and kind of worked his way up the rotation each year that he was there, developed that three-point shot his final season in Gainesville, and suddenly he bursts on the scene in the NBA and becomes a guy who gets a $90 million contract by the end of things. So there is definitely a path here. If he adds that jump shot, I think it can be a similar path where a guy who has the body of a four, enough athleticism to play a little bit of three, and can create those mismatches. And if he can develop the jump shot, I see a lot of paths to a successful NBA career there.
Kind of sticking along at Florida. Let's look at his front court mate with Alex Condon.
Mhm.
You come in, Alex Condon has a background in Australian rules football, decided I guess it would have been his equivalent to junior year, to decide to focus fully on basketball. Comes in 6'11", strong, physical guy who can move, but he also has hands. My first time watching Alex Condon was when he was still in high school playing for the NBA Academy. He was going up against Common Malawak. The matchup in that game was Rocco Zakarski and Common Malawak, but Condon was the one that stole the show. He was stretching the floor, picking pop threes, finish around the basket, a couple dunks. He's more mobile than you think, both vertically and laterally. He's got a physicality to him with the Australian rules football background, and he's got hands and touch. Now it's just a matter of late coming to the basketball game, continuing to get the feel together, continuing to learn how to create leverage, continuing doing all that on the defensive end of the floor, and then showing what his offensive game is. Continuing to add to how does he create advantage? Is he able to pick and pop, shoot consistently? Is he able to stretch the floor consistently? Is he able to play out of the dunker spot consistently? Can he consistently get to the left shoulder? It's just finding those consistent spots where his spots are on the floor to score and create advantage on the offensive end, and then learning the leverage points and all that on the defensive end of the floor. But I think there's a lot of stuff there when it comes to that actual size that he has, the strength that he has, the mobility that he has. Now he's not like a super mobile guy, but he is mobile. He is vertical. There's a lot of stuff there as a guy who is kind of who can find a rotation pretty quickly and for a while at the next level, provided things continue to come together.
Yeah, I mean, he's the type of just anchor guy that you put in there, you're going to get consistency. One of the things that I'm most interested in from him is his ability to play alongside other centers. We've seen him play with Ruben Chinyelu. He's going to do that again this season. Uh, for a guy who is as big, just physically as he is, not a guy who is stretching the floor, knocking down threes, to be able to play alongside someone else, I think says a lot, A, about Todd Golden and his ability to space the floor there, but also about his kind of mindset, the way that he thinks the game, because it takes some high IQ basketball to be able to fit two guys on the court like that. And Condon has figured that out, playing at the top of the key, whether that's in the facilitator or setting those high pick and roll screens. He's got something down there, and I think he's going to build on it throughout this season. I want to touch on Mackenzie Mbako, of course, transferring to Texas A&M. Interested for a couple of reasons. and also higher than the consensus for sure on him than many people because, first of all, he's going into Bucky McMillan's system. They're going to get up and down. He's going to score some points there for sure on that wing. Bucky, he's had a lot of really good players. He has not had a player since I guess his high school coaching days. He had Trendon Watford, but that'd be the closest thing that we can talk to about what he's ever had on the wing. I think that Mbako's primed for a breakout year, and that all starts with his pre-draft performance last year as he went through the process. I loved his performance throughout that offseason, what he did at the NBA Combine, that entire week in Chicago. He performed in the G League Combine, I believe, as well. I thought that he looked like a different player than what we had seen the last couple of years at Indiana. And I was really intrigued by those tools. Not only the ability to make perimeter shots, which he showed during that short span, but just the motor, the ability to impact the game in different ways, the ability to play in a team concept on defense, things that aren't easy to do when you're in that kind of pickup setting, go out there with four guys that you met yesterday type of stuff. Was really interested in his ability to build on that and find success going forward because he's a body type, he's a position that people are looking for in this game.
Yeah, he's a very interesting. He's just a very interesting player. He's one of those guys that at this point in time, I've liked the concept of Mackenzie Mbako more than what Mackenzie Mbako has actually provided on the floor. Um, in the 6'6" range, unbelievable length. He's got a strong frame, and in theory, he can shoot the basketball. Now it's going to be about making the shots. Now it's going to
Yes.
be about getting into the advantages and capitalizing on what he's able to do, getting into the corners and knocking down those threes. The defensive stuff, I'm going to be interested to see what that looks like as well. A little heavy footed at times at Indiana. So, how does he move and maneuver? How does he switch within the flow of a defensive scheme? And can he guard on an island? What does the help defense look like in time and all that? Decision making on ball, have some questions with as well. He's had a little bit of time in college. The intel's going to be big with him that you get. So I'll be curious as to what a change of scenery looks like for McKenzie. I'll be curious, if you remember at one point in time, McDonald's All-American, committed to
Yep.
Duke, all that. Um, I'll be curious what a change of scenery looks like for him getting down to Texas A&M, playing in this type of system. Obviously, the lure of Mike Woodson was the pro type system, was the pick and roll stuff with his ability to pull gravity off ball and do all that. Now getting a more up and down system, he'll probably have more on ball duties. He'll probably have more, ball in hand decision making opportunities as well. So it'll be interesting to see kind of just what it all looks like and how he's able to respond to that.
Yeah, for sure. Let's bounce now. Let's get a little bit rapid fire here through some other names in the SEC that we like that we're keeping an eye on over the course of this next year. Because of course, I mean, there's a lot of time. We're going to talk about all these guys throughout the entire season.
Yeah. So you want me just to name a couple more names?
Yeah, just throw
Run with
some
that.
out there. We'll pick a couple and we'll back and forth some ideas here.
So Carter Knox is one for me. Arkansas, I'm eager to see the step he's able to make. I think he's got a lot of the tools. You're looking at what they did last year with the Du Thoreau, kind of in that similar
Hmm.
mold physically, not game wise necessarily, but physical mold. Big 6'6", 220 guy that can get downhill and athletic and stuff. I'm eager to see the steps that Carter Knox makes there. Boogie Fland at Florida is an interesting one for me.
Hmm.
Another Florida guy, Micah Hangleton. I'm eager to see what he gets back to. Looking at the Marshall days, 7'1" and mobile. Boogie Fland was the number one point guard coming out of high school. He can dribble, shoot, and pass. Eager to see what the change of scenery to Florida looks like and the step he's able to take there. Billy Richmond at Arkansas is another one. Cannon Catchings has some intrigue at Georgia. He's got the tools now. Can his game back up the tools that he has? Can he find the consistency on the floor of being, the positional size, length, and able to shoot the ball and all that? What does that look like? It wasn't consistent last year at BYU. What does it coming back home to Georgia look like? Darion Reed, former McDonald's All-American at Oklahoma. Now, change of scenery. What's the ball in hand decision making look like with them? Can he put that stuff together? Anthony Robinson's one I know you're going to want to touch on. Jaden Quaintance at Kentucky. We're going to talk about him a lot. Defensive minded player, possibly one of the best defensive players in college basketball. We'll see what he looks like coming back from injury. And as I said, Anthony Robinson, kind of the consummate point of attack guard at Missouri.
Yeah, I do want to talk. We'll touch on Anthony Robinson here, and then before we move to the ACC, we have to talk about Tahad Pettiford, who I'm surprised wasn't on that rapid fire list. I know you're just kind of throwing a bunch of names out there, but Robinson is a guy who I am really interested in. I think the defense is there. I think that it provides him such a platform to be able to perform. And I'm interested to see over the course of the year at Missouri how much of the on ball role he takes. And if he doesn't take that on ball role, okay, then what can you show me on the wing? What offensively can you provide me? Because it's the question marks come on offense with him. That's where he's going to solidify himself as a potential NBA draft pick this season because the defense is there. I really, really like what I saw on the tape, especially as we got through SEC play at the end of last year.
Yeah, I think he's kind of one of those guys. He's going to have to be on the ball given his size and all that. Low volume, but he was a 40% guy from three this past year.
Mhm.
I'd like to see him up his ability to score the basketball a little bit more, maybe add a little bit more in the middle, some pull ups, some floaters, that type of stuff, finishing at the rim. How does he do that? Um, Missouri plays very up tempo, trap, press, get it downhill, and all that stuff. So eager to see what he looks like in the half court on ball and any decision making opportunities that he might have there. He's got a lot of people that really like his game, and there's
Mhm.
some intrigue there. Searching for the point guard to come out of nowhere and all that. So eager to see what it kind of looks like. In the same vein that you are, he's got a lot of momentum heading into the season. Eager to see if he can capitalize on it.
Yep. And again, I remind you, if you heard a name there and we didn't touch on it, I promise you throughout the course of this season, we're going to talk a lot about those guys. Acquaintance is one that you talked about. I like, we were making these lists and I kind of took Quaintance off of mine because I said, look, we're going to talk about Quaintance probably 10, 15 more times before between now and when the NBA
Yeah.
draft rolls around. So you're going to get plenty of that content. But I'm interested because neither of us included this player on our list, really, but he's a guy that we have to talk about. Tahad Pettiford returns to Auburn. He was in the
Mm-hmm.
NBA draft process for a moment last season. I've seen a lot of people who talk about him as this first round type of player. And I think that if we were just going and drafting the 30 most talented basketball players, I think that he would have a case. Unfortunately, we talk about how hard it is for small guards, excuse me, to make it in the NBA. We talk about positional value in the NBA and what position is least available. Okay, that makes them a more rare prospect. They're going to go higher because there's more teams that are going to be willing to jump in line trying to get that player before anyone else can get their hands on him. I just don't think he checks enough of the outside of skill box that you need to go high up in an NBA draft.
So when you look at Tahad Pettiford, he had a lot of success this past year, even dating back to his AAU days and all that stuff, bringing electricity. An off-ball guy who brought electricity. He came off the bench this past season, and he was the only player on the team that could create a shot. He can create a clean look for himself within the flow of an offense, and he did that. And within 18 minutes in a game, he brought that ability, the creativity, that electricity. Going back to his days at AAU ball, he played with Malik Thomas and Elliot Cadeau both in the backcourt together. He was able to kind of form an off-ball role where he got the ball and was able to. This year, he's going to have to be a full-time point guard for Auburn.
Mm-hmm.
Not something that he's necessarily ever done prior to outside of maybe his high school days when he had the ball and was still, getting the shots.
Yeah.
What do the reads look like? Is he able to run the flow of an offense? I mean, we know he can create shot opportunities. We know he can get into clean looks, but almost kind of like Robert Dillingham was a couple of years ago at Kentucky, um, they did a good job this past year of limiting his minutes and putting him in advantageous situations to do what he's able to do, which is create shot opportunities for himself. What does it look like when he's running a team? What does it look like when he is getting other people involved? How does he create consistent advantages for his teammates? And what does it look like on the defensive end at the point of attack when it gets into the half court and you got a 6'3" guy, that he's guarding? Is he able to kind of keep that person out of the paint and put that person in a disadvantage
Yeah.
guarding the ball? I think that they did a great job this past year of really piquing the intrigue and utilizing him to the best of his abilities. Now he's going to have to take a step and do some things that he hasn't necessarily done consistently previously, and we'll see. We'll see what it looks like him on ball making decisions.
Yeah. I'm just really interested in the Rob Dillingham sort of comparison, I guess, because Rob is a guy that I was not particularly high on. I know some people who were extremely high on him, but it was such a narrow lane, right? It was all based on the idea that Rob Dillingham might have been the best offensive basketball player in that draft class. Yet, like you said, Kentucky could only play him about half the game. I believe there was some stat that they won like 90% of their games when he played less than 20 minutes, and that number went significantly down in games that he played more than 20 minutes. Like it was just there was a certain amount of Rob Dillingham that you could have out there because of the size concerns, because of the defensive concerns that added up. Well, you're now telling Tahad, if you want to follow that model, you've got to go out there and be the best offensive player in a draft class. So it's just such a narrow pathway to find your way up the draft board in this position. Now, I think he is super talented. And I also don't think that when we talk about NBA draft boards and your limitations on how far up you can go, it doesn't put a cap on how good you can be as a pro. You can find ways around this, you can develop throughout the course of your career, but we're talking about the concerns that people are going to have and how that's going to impact where they draft you and how much they're going to invest in you at this point.
Yeah, I think Dillingham's a good case study. I think Jace Richardson in this past draft
Yeah,
class is a good case study. Kind of looking to see what how they do, how quickly are they able to get into rotations, and how what are they able to do with their minutes, and all that. So I think kind of watching the path of a Jace Richardson, watching the path of a Rob Dillingham, and seeing the investment that NBA teams make, toward them, would be very interesting to see as to what Todd Pettiford looks like.
for sure. When we come back on the other side, we're going to talk through some ACC guys who will be in the fold, who will be talked about quite a bit in the NBA draft conversation right here on Three True Values Big Board. Welcome back in as we continue talking about some of the top returning players in college basketball as it relates to the NBA draft class, especially the 2026 class. But of course, as we know, the advent of NIL and everything else, sometimes these guys extend their college careers longer. And there's a guy who I think we should kind of kick off here, Jamie, with as we talk about the ACC, who probably fits into that category where in past years, maybe he tests the NBA waters a little bit harder, tries to work on his game through the offseason, convince teams that there's a runway there. Instead, Isaiah Evans is able to return to Duke, which brings in another incredible recruiting class, couple of transfers in the door, no one who's going to shake up the lineup. But now he has the chance to develop in a familiar system with an increased role rather than try to get to the NBA and figure it out on the fly. Obviously, we know Isaiah Evans, one of the best shooters in this class, 42% from three last season. Only averaged 7 points a game, though. So, can he keep the percentages high on greater volume while also doing more? Can he get more slashes towards the basket? Does he get the ball in his hand a little bit more, try to create space for himself and others? There's a lot that can go into Isaiah Evans's um, development on offense and defense. We'll talk about as a whole other subject that he's got to work on. But I'm really interested to see how he takes his game to the next level across the board this season.
I think Evans is such a unique prospect. His ability to create space and gain advantages on the offensive end of the floor is quite possibly unlike any other in college basketball. He's able to get a clean look on most possessions that he has with his footwork, with his high release, and all that. So it's going to be fascinating to see kind of what that looks like. He's going to be able to get to his shot often, and he's wired to do that. And how can you tell a guy who gets clean looks consistently, who's one of the better shooters in the country, to temper that down and move the ball and look for somebody else to get another shot as well? So it's going to be very interesting to see how he toggles in between, the best shot for the team and the best shot for him and all that type of stuff. It's going to be also very interesting to see how Duke utilizes him. Again, we spoke about the Todd Pettiford earlier. He was used in an electric role. If he makes the first three, then he goes to the second three, and he for the third three, and he gets going until kind of slows down a little bit. And that's kind of what he was last year. Now, how's he going to be in bigger minutes this year when defense, with rebounding, with moving the ball and creating, continuity within the team? How is that going to look? For somebody who has the most lethal aspect of the game of basketball, being able to score consistently, how does the other aspects of the game affect winning? How does he put his team in advantages to consistently situations and able to consistently do that? He's somebody who can go for 30 points in a 12-minute stretch,
Yeah.
and it's uncanny. Having seen him do it, having seen him have 20+ point quarters in high school, um, rather consistently. But then there's also the you know 2 for 14 games and all that stuff mixed in as well. How does he find the consistency of helping his team win? And that's going to be the big aspect with Isaiah Evans as to kind of what he looks like this year.
Yeah, and I think the defense, it's a work in progress. I don't think it's just going to overnight. He's going to turn into a 3-and-D kind of prospect by any means. But this is where I do think that NIL and everything else that comes with it has helped a lot of these players, because Isaiah Evans is a guy in the past that you probably would have said probably still a one and done, potentially go in the late first round, early second round, and just get your clock started, develop there. But let's be honest, NBA coaches aren't going to play a guy who can't hold up on the defensive end of the court. And that's an area that he has to work. So I think it's way more beneficial to get big minutes at Duke than it is to play 4 or 5 minutes a game, maybe half the games of a season in an NBA setting. So really good for his development, I think, to be back this year and get more and more reps.
For sure, he's another guy that you can look kind of toward the Rob Dillingham mold of kind of an offensive type player. They got similar size. I mean, you look at other guys like that. Cam Thomas in the league, he's 6'4", 220 or so. Isaiah Evans is in the 6'6", 6'7" range, and 180 pounds, 185 pounds, somewhere in that. I don't know exactly what they list him at, but how does he hold up? How does he consistently create advantages? Do all that stuff? It's gonna be a fascinating test study, because he does do the most valuable thing that people look for, being able to consistently knock down shots.
Who's somebody that you're looking at here in the ACC?
Somebody that we talked about previously, and somebody that is kind of on here, Donnie Freeman's one. I think that's going to be very fascinating to see how he does. He was off to a rapid start in his freshman year, and he was in the midst of growth when he got injured and had to miss the remaining parts of the season. But there's a 6'9", 6'10" player who has length. He can stretch the floor with his jump shot. And he's got some versatility there. We had mentioned it previously, the guys that can toggle in between the forward spots when it
Mhm.
comes. Obviously, again, not a one-to-one type situation, but the Taylor Hendricks of the world and drafts past, there's some value there. It's going to look like with Donnie, can he consistently knock down that shot? Can he consistently pull the gravity in a catch and shoot type situation? But also, what does it look like on the defensive end? Is he able to slide his feet? Is he able to open his hips and rotate? How does that look? Is he able to guard the threes as well as switching down and guarding the fours, which we kind of know he can do, getting in the passing lanes and protecting the rim a little bit and all that. So, what does the fluidity look like when he moves laterally? How does that look this year coming back from injury? And
Yeah.
then tightening up the offensive game, being the consistent 38+% 3-point type shooter, especially off catch and shoots, that rising possibly above 40 on catch and shoot type situations as well. And then getting into 1-2 dribble pull ups and scoring from different spots kind of on the floor, getting in the mid post type stuff as well. What does that game development look like? I think he only played like 13, 14 games this past year. The last 8 that he played in was 15+ points per game. He was really kind of trending upward for that Syracuse team this past year. The injury comes in. How did he recover? How does he look? What does the athleticism fluidity look like? But I think there's a lot of tools there. There's a lot of tools there that he has that check boxes that are valuable, even as role players at the next level, as to what it is that they're looking for in the league.
Yeah, he was the guy who last year I was really kind of interested in tracking. It felt like some people got out on him pretty early. He moved down a lot of boards. I kind of kept him up there, and he rewarded that, like you said, 15 points a game over his last handful before the injury, and then the injury just kind of set it back where you kind of understood he's going to have to come back. He's going to have to play another year. He's going to have to show that he can do this in a full season. So I have some high hopes for what he can be this year at Syracuse. I know that that's a program that has some question marks about what they're going to be, how they can perform, but with him, and I think he gets back JJ Starling. I think that's going to be important for his game to be that combo forward that we're talking about. Having a guard who can have the ball in his hands, who you're familiar with, you've played with before, is always beneficial if you're looking to add things to your game. So I like the runway here for Donnie Freeman. I still think that he's got a pretty high ceiling, and I like the kind of path, the kind of archetypes that come in my mind when I'm watching him play. Those power forwards who can mix it up and provide you some versatility, if nowhere else, defensively lining up because of some of the athleticism, because of some of the length, speed ratios, things like that. I just think that there's a good path for him if he can develop, if he can get back from that injury and add some to his game.
I yeah, I completely agree. I think the archetype is there. I think the upside is there.
Yeah.
Now it's just he's been kind of out of sight, out of mind for the past 10 or so months. Now, how does he come back? I think the ball's in his court to see how he came back, how he rehabbed in the offseason, how he rehabbed the injury, and now what does it look like putting on the floor? There's some steps to take. The runway's there. Very intriguing.
Yep. I want to talk about Baye Ndongo from Georgia Tech, a front court player who has tested the NBA draft waters a couple of times now, and every time looks like he belongs out there. By no means is he, bursting into the first round conversation. Of course, that's why he has come back both times. But every time I watch him play out there with some high level competition, I think this guy, he matches up. Averaged 13 and 9 last season. Really good numbers there under Stoudemire. And I mean, I just think that there's a spot. He's a little bit undersized for the center position, but as I said, 9 rebounds a game. He rebounds the position well. He's gone up against some bigger guys. Doesn't often look like he's out of place or completely mismatched. So I think it's just about rounding out the game. It's about finding the right spot for him more than anything, because as we know, the center position is very specialized. It's about finding the team that values what you do and filling that role well in the minutes that you have.
Physicality will never go out of style. Now, obviously, you're going to want the sex appeal of being able to stretch the floor and to switch and to do all that type of stuff. Physicality, somebody who has instincts and being able to see the ball and get the ball, will never go out of style. Bayandongo is a very good rebounder. He's a very instinctive rebounder. He's able to high point the ball in traffic, collect rebounds, strong hands, and do all that. He's also in the passing lanes. He's instinctive, protecting the rim. He's instinctive on the defensive side. There are instincts there. And like I said, there's a physicality factor that he brings. There's a high floor that while the ceiling might be a little bit lower, the floor is a little bit higher, as to knowing, like you said, exactly what role he's going to play. There's no question marks about what he is as a player. And if that's something that you value, again, as I said, physicality just doesn't really go out of style
Yeah.
at any point in time. Knowing what he is and the value in that, there's something there. There's something in there to be able to put onto an NBA floor eventually and be able to create some advantage and gain opportunity through him.
Yeah, for sure. Let's move across here and let's talk about another center in the league who's a different situation. Sat behind a lottery pick last year, got out on the court, did some interesting things while he was there. Patrick Ngongba at Duke, he's going to get a huge opportunity now to kind of take over the center position, it looks like.
Yeah, and Ngongba's an interesting one. Obviously, his mom's in the George Washington Hall of Fame on the basketball side. Dad played at George Washington as well. Mom's a basketball coach. So he's got basketball bloodlines and genes. He's somebody who went through a body transformation later in his high school career, dropping a lot of weight and kind of getting down to where he is now. But also after that weight loss, he's kind of struggled through injuries
Mm.
through this past year and then his senior year in high school and everything. So figuring out his body, staying on the floor and stuff is going to be very interesting. Um, Going through their practice and all that, his ability to stretch the floor is intriguing at this point. They're going to use him in pick and pop situations. They're going to use him in floor spetting, trail big type situations as well to be able to create space. what he's able to do on the block is going to be interesting, and how he looks defensively is going to be interesting. Is he able
Yeah.
to be a true rim protector? What does the athleticism look like? Is he going to be able to slide and switch? Is he going to be a true rim protector? Is he going to have to be a true drop coverage guy? What does that look like coming in at about 6'10"? Going to need to continue adding weight to his base core and all that. Can he consistently create advantages on the block? Where does he score from outside of just shooting the three? It's going to be very interesting. When he was younger, very good hands, very good around the block, able to get over his left shoulder consistently. With this weight loss, obviously the stamina is better, and he's able
Yeah.
to run up and down the floor a whole lot. And he's going to have opportunity this year. Will he be able to take the maturity and step into the role as to what it is? Because Duke's putting a lot into him. He's got him and Malik Brown, and those are kind of the two bigs that they have. And Malik Brown obviously has had the injuries too with the shoulder coming
Right.
through as well. So he's going to have the opportunity to show what he can do. He's got a past of being able to score, being able to advantages, being able to stretch the floor and do multiple things. How does he hold up with the rigors of a full season as a starter?
Yeah, and he's got one of the widest ranges of outcome here because he could definitely um, go out there, be the starting center for a Final Four level Duke team, and put up rebounds and block shots and trail threes, and suddenly we're talking about him up in the lottery. But
Yeah.
there's also, like you said, there's going to be an adjustment period. It's a new role. It's a bigger opportunity. He's got to hold up first of all, beyond anything, and it's just going to be one of those names that's definitely worth tracking throughout the entire season as things go on.
Yeah, for sure. He's there are opportunities there and all that. So it's gonna be interesting to watch.
Yep. Who else you got that you're looking at here in the ACC?
Henry Vassar, UNC is one that I'm going to be very intrigued to see how it kind of plays out with him. 7 footer coming over from Arizona,
Mhm.
very skilled offensively. He's going to be used in a lot of different situations. It looks like for UNC, again, somebody who's able to step out and stretch the floor. But he's also able to play out of a short roll. He's also able to play on the block, dunker spots, and use as kind of a hub as a passer. There's going to be a lot of high-low stuff that they have going through with Vesser and what he has with Caleb Wilson. So being able to create advantages in the half court in that manner, being able to stretch the floor, being able to score from multiple levels. What does he look like defensively? How does he move? The switching stuff. He's legit 7 foot. Huge offensive analytics this past year at Arizona. Eager to see how it transfers into a bigger role. 20 minutes a game this past year. Eager to see what it looks like in 28 to 30 or so minutes in the ACC as a central hub in the half court for UNC. He's got a chance to take a big step. Obviously, he's got to take a step. Still kind of thin, but it's going to be interesting to see what type of step he takes and how that step looks.
Yep. Really interested to see Darian Williams at NC State, another school in that area. He, of course, had a really good year for Texas Tech last year. Um, Went through the NBA draft process like a lot of these guys that we're talking about, and it was it was interesting. I wasn't 100% sure which way he was going to go throughout that process for much of it. Of course, he comes back to college basketball, ends up with Will Wade, and now I don't I don't know if there's any team where I have less of an understanding of who I should be uh, picking as the top players on the team versus who's going to be a role player than NC State because they brought in a lot of pieces, a lot of talent, and now they're going to kind of put it together into a roster here. And so I'm really interested to see how things fall. But we know that Darian Williams is going to be part of that picture regardless.
Yeah, yeah. He's somebody who you trust with the ball in his hands. He can make a play. He passes the ball. He elevates the floor of a team. There's a physicality factor. The jump shot's going to be a kind of a key factor for him if he can get the jump shot consistent this year. You can do that. You can play him at both forward positions. There's a physicality factor. As I said, he moves the ball very well. IQ. He just kind of brings a whole lot to the table
Yeah.
of a hub of an offense, especially at the collegiate level.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated, and I have not gotten any intel on this. Probably something to look for to try to track down. But with a lot of these guys, they go through the draft process and they get feedback. I want to know, I would love to understand what the feedback was for Williams because, like you said, it's a pretty well rounded, there's a lot of different things he can do. What is it that NBA teams want him to accomplish? Because, especially when you see guys transfer after the draft process, a lot of times that decision is based in at least part on what feedback they got and going around to coaches saying, will you give me the opportunity to work on my game in that way. So interested to see how that impacts his role at NC State, how it looks versus last year at Texas Tech, and just how he's able to grow his draft stock throughout that process.
Yeah, for sure. Some other guys in the ACC I'm kind of looking at. Adrian Woolley is going to be interesting at Louisville. You have Ryan Conwell also at Louisville, kind of eager to see what roles they take on and what they look like. Malik Renault, Indiana transferred down to Miami, eager to see kind of what his role looks like down there at Miami. Seth Trimble at UNC, I think, has got a chance to really take a step, given that physicality that he brings on the defensive end of the floor at UNC. And there's going to be others that pop up without question, probably in the ACC as well throughout the season. But I think it's going to be a fun league to watch.
I've got one more name that I want to throw out there, and then we'll get out of here. Where are you, if at all, in the NBA draft conversation with Isaac McNeely first entering this season? But also, if I told you at the end of the year, if I said, look, he played next to Mikel Brown, and it was one of the best backcourts in college basketball, what does that do in theory to his draft stock if he's able to work on and off the ball? He's able to be part of a successful backcourt because he does so many things, but he's one of those players that we talk about that it's finding the spot, finding where he adds up in the NBA.
Yeah, measurement's going to be big for him. Where he
Yeah.
measures that's going to be big for what he's able to do at the next level. I think defensively, he's going to have to show that he's able to stand up, but also too kind of some creation on the ball, what that looks like as well. We know he can shoot the ball, we know he can score the ball, pull gravity, and do that stuff. What he looks like on the ball, what he looks like in the defensive side of the floor, I think will be interesting.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Jamie, thanks once again for coming on, talking hoops here. We will be back next week with some more recruiting content along the way. We will have this, of course, throughout the season. So we've got a long way to go and a lot more basketball to talk about.
James, I appreciate it, man.
All right, talk to you next week.
Later.